2, 1. And we are live. Whatever you are, wherever you are, thank you for joining the Design of Everyday People live stream, where I talk to senior designers from all over the world and where you literally get to ask them anything. So get your fingers typing, or get your typing fingers ready, and I'll weave in the questions as we go. But again, with all these sessions, I like to make it interactive. So chat, comment where you are listening to this below, and I'll flash your name on the screen to see there's actually other humans on the end and not just me rambling on the interwebs. But let's start the show. This is the Design of Everyday People.
It sound right, boy.
If you're watching this, you're probably applying to jobs and hearing nothing back. I know you've updated your portfolio more times than you can count. You've rewritten your resume and maybe even taken some new courses to upskill in some new AI tool, but still invisible. So the real question is, what if the problem isn't your experience, but how the market classifies you? And what I mean by that is hiring managers aren't searching for good designers, so to speak. They search for specific designers. And if your positioning looks broad or generic, you disappear before a human even sees your work. Hi, I'm Rajeev Subramanian, founder of Shift UX and adjunct faculty at Georgetown University, and I've helped over 100 designers and researchers in the last 8 years reposition themselves into roles from startup all the way to enterprise. And on Friday, March 13th at 2 p.m. Eastern, I'm teaching a live masterclass where you'll see the positioning mistakes that quietly filter designers out, how generalists turn into must-hire specialists, and why some designers get interviews without relying on job boards. Now, if your job search feels harder than it should be, there is usually a reason, and this masterclass will show you exactly what that is. So register below. You'll also get chapter 1 of my yet-to-be-released book, Repositioned, exclusively when you sign up. So it's 2 hours, it's free, save your spot, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday, March 13th.
Hey, back here again. And if you want to join Rajeev on Friday, this Friday, March 13th, you can scan that QR code on the right, but I would also leave it at the top of the stream. And you can also head to the link, the event link description, and access it from there. And Rajeev, as he mentioned in that video, will show you his exact repositioning framework that helped over 100 designers land roles at companies like Meta and Capital One. And we are lucky because I invited Rajeev on this stream to go through some, not all of the topics covered in his masterclass, of course. That would be far too long. But over 300 designers have signed up and seats are limited in his masterclass. So if you're struggling with your job search, this is a session you don't want to miss. Again, I'll leave that QR code in the top left, and you can sign up for his free masterclass happening on Friday the 13th. Anyway, let's get back to the show, shall we? Any folks on the end? I see people scanning that QR code, but if you're out there, drop where you're from. And we have our first person. Hello, Andreas from Sweden. That's cool. How you doing, man? Again, we always start with the introduction, so let me go first here, and I'll hide that. Oh, it's not working. Oh, we have someone else. All right. Is that Netherlands? Kitty from Netherlands watching on YouTube? I don't know. Okay. Hello from PA. Hey, what's going on? All right. Okay. I need to get back to the show. But thanks for joining, guys. Welcome to How to Get Hired in UX 2026. And with always introductions, I'm Chris, the founder of UX Playbook. But before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX. But now I spend most of my time helping designers navigate a fuzzy UX career with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But again, that's enough about me. Today, I'm joined by Rajeev, Adjunct Professor at Georgetown University, founder of Shift UX, and a career strategist. So let's get him out and find out how he's doing. Good to have you on, Rajeev. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about anything and everything under the sun when it comes to job search and positioning in the time that we have. So
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, for those who don't know about you, do you want to give the audience just a quick spiel of what you're about and what you're doing these days?
Yeah, sure. So I've been in the UX and design industry for about a dozen years. I was a career switcher, a career changer into the field. I was in a lot of marketing, SEO, event planning types of roles, completely different field, before I moved in. And I moved into the field and I've kind of progressed through working through a lot of different companies, found my niche and my domain, which is kind of in the financial markets and the fintech industry. And over the last several years, that's when I started Shift UX, started kind of coaching, mentoring people to figure out where do I belong in this ever changing tech world, whether it's a UXer, designer, researcher, somewhere in between, someone doing a little bit of each. And at the same time, I've also, right when I started the company, I also became an adjunct faculty at Georgetown University, which is here where I live around Washington, D.C. Technically, I live 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. in the U.S. In Virginia, but close enough. And so I teach a couple different courses there, one being psychology of design. And I kind of use all this try to understand the market at a very, very deep level. So not only, uh, the psychology of the design itself and the users, but also the hiring managers and recruiters and the people that are trying to hire you, getting into their heads and trying to help everyone succeed in this market. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and provide whatever I can advice and answer the questions that you all have for me.
I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions for you, dude. So no worries about that. And again, when we talk about stuff, for the folks listening, please, if something comes up, if an idea comes up, if a doubt or a question comes up, please drop it in the comments so we can revisit it, or I will try and weave it in the conversation. Again, I want to remind the folks out there that this conversation is recorded. So if you can't tune in for the whole thing, then either watch it on YouTube or just head to Rajiv's masterclass that he's hosting, and it'll be a deep dive of what he's about to share this session. So let me just get this started, the conversation and the topic. So in 2026, the job market has shifted, as we all know, but UX designers are still kind of playing this volume game, the spray and pray application, generic positioning that says, nah, I don't know, not too much, waiting for any job board to save them, wondering why they feel invisible to recruiters. And research shows that the job market is punishing generalists and rewarding specialists in our field. And I believe this is the research that you did, Rajiv. And maybe it's time we change how we search for jobs. So the question is how? And that's why today we're diving into three main topics: the volume, why the volume game is dead, how to find your value wedge, and how to get headhunted and understand how roles are actually being filled by organizations from the recruiter and organization's perspective. And that's why I wanted to invite you, Rajiv, on to break down this how the whole new hiring game kind of works. All right. So
Yeah,
why don't we start with the first question, which is when we say the volume game is dead, what does that mean to you, Rajiv?
sure. And now this is something that all of us have been doing at any point in time. I can guarantee all of us did the volume game. We tried to apply to as many jobs as we could. And the reason why it's very difficult to understand is because for some people it worked and for many people it didn't. So for the people that it worked, especially, they gave the advice that you just got to keep applying to as many jobs as possible. Now, the reason why this is different now is because in the last couple of years, let's just say post 2022 to 2023, when ChatGPT came and AI came and changed a lot of things in terms of skill sets needed, it became not only easier to apply to many jobs using a lot of these different AI tools, so it gave the illusion that we were actually doing a lot of work, when in fact, what we were doing is we were just sending out a lot of different applications for jobs that we didn't match. And when I say that, a lot of people are like, "Well, no, I matched the job. Like I could do that job." and your capability of doing the job is not the same as being a match for the job. And I will talk about that a little soon, but that is the first kind of mental switch you have to understand, is that number one, it's not a volume game, at least at the outset. Now you can eventually get to a decent volume once you understand where you match, what you're good for, where you can find your niche and domain. Then of course, you approach those in a very targeted fashion. But to people come to me all the time and they're just saying like, this used to work and it doesn't work anymore, or I'm spinning my wheels. It's been 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. So obviously there's something else that's going on here. And what it is obviously the saturation of the market is changing. You know, when the demand used to be so high, but the saturation was so low, yes, the volume game could probably work. And you might, you shoot out 100 applications, you might get a couple of responses. But what happens when the demand is slightly decreased, but the saturation has gone like this? Then that strategy won't work anymore. And doing that over and over again will frustrate you even more. It'll probably cause burnout quicker for you. So it's not even good for your emotional and mental health, because you're doing work that doesn't get you to get responses from the job market. And then it's emotionally draining you. And then on top of that, when you're emotionally exhausted, what I always say that, emotional exhaustion kills your strategic thinking. And a lot of people are just not strategically thinking about what types of roles that they should go for, what type of designer or researcher do they want to be, what is actually growing in the market. Thinking about all these types of things is just missed because we're exhausted. We're like, I don't know. I'm just going to go down on another Reddit rabbit hole and and chime in and then follow the advice of someone basically being like, hey, you just got to apply to 500 jobs and eventually you'll get it. That's a volume game. But also the volume game, I will say, can also be very paralyzing, because there's, mid-level, senior level people, designers who they're like, okay, I don't want to do the volume game, but then they're paralyzed because they don't know what to apply to. So it's almost, the volume game has caused two different problems. One, you keep applying into the void. And the other is, I know that's not the right way, Reggie, but I don't know where to apply to, or like, I think I apply, I do it here and there, and then I don't hear anything. So what do I do? So, I just wanted to kind of frame that as what I've seen over the years, how it kind of changed, and why, because I think the first step is understanding why this problem exists and to kind of stop doing it. And then we can kind of talk about what to do about it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it doesn't, platforms out there now, like, make it super easy to play the volume game, right? Like
Exactly,
your LinkedIn or your job board, it's just like you're one click away and then you just ping everything. And it's like, and you wonder also why nothing's coming back, because they've reduced that barrier to entry. Is like everybody can apply for everything. And if you look on LinkedIn today, it's like 1,000 jobs, 1,000 applicants for a job. And most people probably think, well, I'm too late already. But what does that actually mean? So it's can be very, very frustrating for the people looking for work. You mentioned this phrase, strategically selective. What do you mean by that? And you said you had a formula, around this. Can you share some of that? Because I think it's really interesting, specifically talking about like how to actually kind of look for things that you want to look for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my, I obviously go into a lot of detail on this, for this Friday, there's like, I have several slides and I talk through this. It's in fact like an entire Venn diagram where I put together and I've figured out how to like figure this out, but I can talk about these three, just as we're here right now. So how to think about that is basically, 1/3 of that Venn diagram is, what are your strengths? What are you good at? What have you done? What is the work that you've done that you're proud of? All the questions that everyone always asks you kind of personally. What do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? Where are your weaknesses? Where do you need to upskill? All those things are extremely important. The problem is most people just stop there and they're like, okay, I want to do this. And then what happens is then they realize, okay, I'm just giving a horrible example, but saying like, I really want to be a copywriter and a print designer at a newspaper company. Like, I mean, if you really want to do that, that's a dying market. So that's a bad example, but why would you want to do that in a dying market? All the newspapers are going, the printing out of the newspapers is a long gone industry, So like, that's just like a micro example of just, if you only focus on that. The second piece of that is basically what industries are growing. Like, where is what are the types of different industries that are growing? Is it because they're at any given time, even now, even in what people consider bad markets, whether they're growing, saturated, declining, kind of neutral, there's always going to be growing markets and people hiring. How do we find out, what those are? The short answer to that I can give now, and the more in-depth answer will be on Friday. The short answer is, listen, we have all these tools at our disposal. You can find exactly what's growing. You can go to Crunchbase, you can go to Google, you can go to ChatGPT, you can go to Claude. You can use all these what I call AI brains that basically can source all these things, tell you where potential markets are growing in 2026 in your area, in your geography, across the world. It's there. It's not but I think that's the second part. Then the third part is basically what skills are missing in certain industries. And so if we basically find out, hey, I'm really good at accessibility and web design, and I've built a lot of websites and created design systems, and I understand 508 compliance and whatever, the WCAG 2.0, like let's just say that's really good, and it's a missing skill in certain industries, and it's growing in, let's just say, state and local websites or governments. Well, that's a really key area where, it's giving that as an example, but like there's so many of those examples, and every single person is going to have a potentially different one. So me just telling you that, don't just randomly go after that. If it's not something you truly enjoy, if that market skill is missing in the market, and also it's, where is it growing in what industry? So I think that's the trifecta. And if we figure that out, and kind of get beyond just what do we want and what are we good at, and I do a lot of exercises to basically figure that formula out, and then we can go attack it strategically and select certain types of companies, certain types of roles. And that way, once you do that, you'll be realizing that, oh my God, I actually don't fit for probably 80% of these roles. Like, that's not, I actually probably am only a good fit for maybe 20% of these roles. We'll talk about how also hiring, like the signals that help you get hired, but this will help you along that path, because those are the types of hiring decisions are also made at the outset, initially about, in terms of specificity.
Yeah, that's really smart, because I really like the what market is growing, meaning where is the demand coming from? And then the second piece is like, what actually are they missing that also maps with your strength, so you can actually effectively like sell yourself in and be right. Like, so there's even more demand in that sort of micro area of skills missing. So you're like kind of narrowing it down as you go through these filters. Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Okay. We have a lot of questions coming in, but I will address them later in a bit. I want to get through this. So, reading your report, you said that the market is punishing generalists right now and rewarding specialists. What do you mean by that?
Sure. And this is I'll try to give a couple of minute answer, and then obviously we go in more depth. Of course, I have a lot more detail about this, because this begs the age-old question: should I be a generalist or should I be a specialist? Because we always hear, I'm sure, Chris, you've gotten people on here, they're like, you need to be a generalist now, and other people say you need to be a specialist. And so I've talked to a lot of people, and the answer is both. You need to be both, but at different times. And here's what I mean. So you need to be, what I say, a specialist at the outset, to be noticed on your LinkedIn headline, on your LinkedIn about, on your portfolio, how you welcome people. That needs to be in that trifecta, that Venn diagram I was talking about. If you position yourself talking about those specific things at the outset, number one, it gives you a clear, specific thing that people actually signal, that people actually look at, and they're like, oh wow, I can do that really effectively. Now the question that people will come back to me and will be like, well, doesn't that restrict my options? That means I can't apply to all these places. And again, that's the first mental barrier that you have to just get across. You are not good for majority of the companies. You are not a match for them. They are not a match for you. And if you can get past that, that's the step number one. Then you can understand that, okay, I need to maybe get a little bit more specific, niche down, find my domain at the outset. Now, when you get into an interview and you get noticed, and you actually, yes, then you might need to kind of open up the toolkit a little bit, being like, yes, I can collaborate with engineers. I know Figma Make and Claude really well. I can have strategic influence in the organization. You can sell all those things, because you're in the middle of the interview. You can't just be like, I can only do one thing. At that point, you could be like, I can do all these XYZ things. And of course, when you're on the job, everyone knows on the job, you're probably wearing 10 different hats. You need a generalist, depending on, if it's a startup or even in an enterprise, you're going to wear multiple hats. You're going to be a generalist. All I'm saying is that generalism is a death sentence if you're trying to position yourself and find a job. I'm not saying do not stack your skill sets, keep learning, Claude Code, keep learning Cursor, keep, upskilling into the areas that you need to, but don't tell the world that you do 400 things. Then it becomes confusing that everyone's like, I do design research. I'm a generalist. Like, people have positioned themselves on their headline saying like, I'm a UX generalist or a design generalist. That is an automatic, you will get ghosted before they even get to your portfolio, So, and so I think it's important that it's a mental block that we have time to understand. And a lot of questions will come out of this. When I explain this, people are just like, well, what companies do I go for? And then how do I know what to go for? And how do I know exactly, like, I'm just a junior, I'm just entry level, I don't have a niche, I don't know what to do. All these questions will come, which is fine. We can answer as many as we can here, but I wanted to kind of explain the whole generalist versus specialist, because it's both, but it's at different times.
Yeah, I've never heard someone explain it like that, but it makes so much sense. If you are everything to everyone on the onset, on the surface, then you're going to fall on deaf ears and nobody's going to care. So you have to be narrow, know your focus. But once you're in there in the interview, you do want to show your varied skills, because they don't just need someone to hammer the nail, right? They need someone to do all sorts of things. So that makes a lot of sense. And I guess this goes to the point of our second point, which is like, how do you find this thing you call the value wedge? And I guess maybe help us define that.
Sure. Yeah. The value wedge is at a very high level, is where those three things I was talking about, where they meet in the middle. So, and I'll go into a little bit of detail about that. So, because, you can call it a value proposition or unique value proposition. Some people call it a lot of different things. It's less about that, but knowing more that the reason why I call it a wedge is because I want people to basically mentally stamp put their foot in the ground and saying like, I want to do this. This is my wedge. This is what I'm good at. I can do the other things, but I want you to know me for this. And what that would be could vary with every single person. And so usually when people are like, okay, how do I niche down? What are the domains? What is the different value wedges I can do? There's, I have about 5 or 6 different areas where people can focus that I talk through in my webinar. The 2, which are the most easy to categorize, is industry, like what vertical. And then the second is basically like the tech that you use. So I'll give a couple of examples. So in the industry, for example, me, and anyone can go onto my portfolio. You'll see my value wedge, my positioning statement on my portfolio itself. That's I eat my own dog food. I don't spew this out and then not do it myself. And you'll see, if you go to thisisrajeev.com, you can see it. And my value wedge is basically in complex regulated industries, including fintech and healthcare and financial markets. I do a lot of strategic influence workshopping. Yes, I do some design as well, but that's been my area in terms of, and also kind of in an AI forward market, understanding compliance issues, because again, in my industries, there's a massive issues when it comes to AI. So again, you'll see all those different words, and my value wedge in what I do. And yes, like again, when 90% of people come to my portfolio and say, hey, this is not a match for me? Yes, but that's the purpose. Like, but if someone from a fintech or a bank or maybe even healthcare comes there, they'll be like, oh, okay, this person speaking my language. And so that's a value wedge for industry. The other value wedge is, a lot of times people use the default to like, I'll give the example of someone who I work with was, we were trying industry and it wasn't really working. And what he realized was, one recruiter had reached out to him at some point and they're like, do you know the Salesforce design system by chance? Just, do you happen to know it? And he's like, yes, I did that in my job. Is that how you found me? And she was like, yeah, so he was like, oh, okay. So his value edge became in design systems and with an expertise in the Salesforce Lightning design system. And I know that's extremely particular, but you have to understand how many companies are using Salesforce design system. It's not, you think it's specific, but it's actually, it got him, 7 different interviews like in over a month, because he put that on his LinkedIn headline, he put that on his about, and it was a growing market. People were like companies were really needing people. And when there's so many people that can do it, but then he's the easiest to find, they're going to go to, they're going to go to him, because that's how they're searching for people. That's how they basically filter down. We'll kind of get into number 3, but that's why the value wedge is so important.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. I like that you called it the value wedge as well, to your explanation of like, actually sticking yourself in there, right? Like
Exactly.
finding your
Forces
place.
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good. Okay, let's go to number 3. So number 3, before we talk about how to position yourself to be headhunted, it'll probably be good to chat about like how roles are actually filled, so then we can lead to that sort of headhunted. And you did say that it's not the job board. What do you mean by that, and how are roles actually filled?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think many people might even know this, is that sometimes when we've all done this, when you go and see the role and you're like, oh, 100 people have applied. It's been out for like 1 week, or even if it's like sometimes 24 hours, you're like 100 plus in 24 hours. It's crazy. Like, and so it's not usually filled that way. So what I'll provide you, and again, I'll talk more in detail again on Friday, is, there's basically, I talk about different levels of how people are basically found. And the first one, as we know it, and these are kind of pretty intuitive, but they're very important to know, is that number 1, people will always look at referrals, obviously, because that's number 1. But they will look at, I even break it down further, like referrals of just someone that that doesn't fit in the positioning and have the value wedge will still not even sometimes get interviews. So I'm assuming that you have a value wedge, or a decent one, then that positions you well to be, if you're referred in, you should get an interview. And then the next level is basically if you work with like a recruiting or staffing firm, potential for contract to hire roles or those types of things, they'll easily find you. And there's that trust factor that they have with whoever that company is. So they'll introduce you and put you in. And then the third basically is, yes, you can do, warm outreach, for the certain types of companies to know roles before they even happen. I'm not saying do not cold apply at all, but you need to kind of be very aware of the areas that you're going for before you actually do that. Now, the last one is, of course, just you don't have a value edge. You're basically just applying, into the abyss on the job boards. It's not that going to another job board, 3 different job boards, whether it's LinkedIn, Built-in, Indeed, Glassdoor, ZipRecruiter, choose the one that you want, but that's not the way that it's going to be filled. And so I'm not saying for people to do not apply, but you have to be very, very selective and check off a lot of boxes before you apply. And there's things that you can do to follow up, in those instances. I have gotten jobs both from cold applying and with follow-up, knowing my positioning. I've also gotten jobs from referrals. I've also gotten jobs from recruiting and staffing firms. One is not the right way to do it. Combination of doing all those types of things is going to be extremely important.
And I guess I think everybody wants to know this. Like, how do we position ourselves so the jobs kind of come to us, right? How do we get headhunted? And by just being, doing good work and putting ourselves out there, how does that happen?
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 different points I want to talk to about this. Number 1 is, it's very important that, again, I'm assuming that you have a decent value wedge and you kind of understand the areas that you're going for. If you don't, that's step number 1, because everything that I tell you after this is not going to work if you do it. So I always tell people, and this is the people in the program that I work with, and we'll touch upon this also on Friday, is if you figured out your positioning, your value edge in the areas you want to go from the industry, you need to come up with a list of about 30 to 40 companies. Now, why did I choose 30 to 40 companies? It's a generally arbitrary number, but if I just say choose 5 or 10, you could probably rattle off the top of your head and it'd be easy. But if I flex, I'm not telling you to do 100, but if you can find 30 to 40 companies that are going to be good, now whether they're hiring or not, I want to make this clear. because this is, again, you want to set it up so that they'll be able to find you easier. And when you find those companies, you need to be interacting with them. You don't need to, send a bunch of cold DMs on LinkedIn, but you need to be following those companies. You need to be interacting with their posts, even if it's basic likes and comments. You need to be known in their universe and connecting with people in that universe. Don't just randomly apply to a job and ask people, can you refer me if they're not even in your thing? That's advice that I hear all the time. I'm like, no, you're wasting your time. Or even just, blindly messaging people being like, hey, I want a job in your industry. No, you have to, like I said, emotional exhaustion kills your strategic thinking, but you have to take a step back and focus on this. This thing can take about, 3 to 4 or 5 weeks to set all this up, know your value wedge, focus on the right areas, follow those companies, see what the conversations are happening. Then you can potentially do what I call, like these precision types of targeting roles. That's number one. It helps you. But then the second is there's something called the LinkedIn, they call it this 360 brew, is this LinkedIn algorithm that they've used for the last couple of years. That's what they call it. And it used to be that, I need to have all the keywords for these jobs and to be found on LinkedIn. And what it is now is more of like, they actually look at, do you follow the company? Have you commented on one of their posts? Do you follow the people in that company? Are you interacting with their content? Are you, is your actual, like, here's your headline and about section and your profile doing that type of stuff? Because it's the LinkedIn brew, 360 brew is getting smarter, and then it'll eventually expose you to more and more. So the more you do it, the more you kind of focus on those areas, the more you'll find those companies, the more you can connect. And it becomes a way to basically, what I say, build your bubble into those areas. That's how you're found, because then when you're applying to the job, it's not totally random. People will find you, because eventually when people start doing this, people are reaching out to me because they're finding you, because they're actually, it's not, the way that the people search and try to find it. They're looking for these specific filters of like, geography, industry, what is their value prop, B2B audience, B2C audience, is it accessibility? They're doing all these searches in the background because they've shared their screen and they've showed me how they kind of do it. So I'm just trying to give you all kind of an into how that's going to be the most valuable. So I think that's how you actually be headhunted, is you kind of do the legwork and the research and connect with those types of things. It's counterintuitive. It's very tough to understand this, because you feel like you're not, every moment that you're not applying, that you're losing time, for some, in some aspects. But it's one of those things where it makes it harder to mentally do this. But I can tell you, so many people that have worked with me have done it, and they'll be like, I didn't believe Rajeev at first, but it works if you actually do it, that kind of thing. So, so I just wanted to stop there, but I can talk about it a lot more, and I will on Friday. So if anyone wants to join, please feel free to join.
Yeah. And again, if I can get it right, the QR code's here, scan it, or it's in the event description. Yeah. It's really interesting, actually. The sort of the 360 brew, it's kind of like you're training the platform and the algorithm, and you're like building these little nodes of like what you're commenting on or connecting with. And then it's like, then the algorithm realizes that, let's just say the recruiter is searching, then it's like, well, these people have been on the page a bunch of times, or like are interacting with the company. So that kind of makes sense that those are the ones that get matched versus just someone completely random that has spammed keywords, because I'm not sure if that works anymore. Like, So that's really interesting. Okay. Anything else that I missed out that we should chat about before we go to questions, Rajeev?
I'm just trying to make sure. I don't think so. I think that maybe it'll be answered. Maybe as I'm answering some of these questions, we can always do that as well.
Sure. We got a bunch coming up, but I wanted to flash this just for an ego perspective. Someone said Chris's haircut is fire. I love YouTube. That's like the second person on YouTube tuning in. So awesome. Okay. So when we spoke about job boards, I think this question came up. All the job boards like LinkedIn, Indeed, all that stuff. So the question from Elena is like, where do we apply now? Like, if those places are a bit outdated. You touched on this, but maybe we can just reiterate it for Elena.
Yeah, this is I see this question, and in my head I'm thinking, this is an extremely loaded question because it's like the answer to this question is, where do I apply? I don't know. That's what you have to basically find out. So me giving you an answer being like, you need to apply over here. Well, I don't know what work you've done. I don't know what you're good at. I don't know where you want to head. What location are you? What company? What is the company outlook? What are your friends and colleagues being hired for? What do you see in the market? What are the different types of skills that you want to upskill in? Is it, of course, everyone says AI, but that's only, even now, a couple of years ago, I would give the advice of, hey, slap the AI sticker on your headline and you might get found by, recruiters. That doesn't do it anymore because now everyone's doing it. So now you have to add a layer of what I'm talking about. The value edge still needs to be there. And then you can layer on like, hey, I understand AI in this market for X, Y, and Z, but it's going to vary depending on what market that you go for. So it's very hard for me to answer that question because I don't know anything about you. I don't know exactly what would be good for you, what would be, where your value edge would be. If you want quick answers, that's unfortunately not how it's ever been. And that's not going to be like that. Definitely in the 2026 market. There's no quick answers, shortcuts to this. But I can point you in the right direction if I know a couple of these, the answers to some of those things.
Yeah. I should rename this show to "It Depends" because
exactly.
Like all the nuances that could come up. We just say that it could be a drinking game every time we say "it depends."
Exactly.
Take a shot. All right. Okay. What about this one? What new skills will UX professionals need in 2026 to 2030 that are not emphasized today? Do you see anything based on your research and the folks that you've been working with?
Yeah, what I do notice is obviously in the in the AI world, depending on where you are, I see a lot of future skills in understanding the capabilities, limitations, and governing hallucinations and outcomes of AI. So it's almost like AI governance. That's a massive thing, and especially if you get into like larger enterprises, or certain companies in the financial markets and healthcare, where data can be very sensitive, and like we have to be very careful. They can't afford to make many mistakes. You can't just hallucinate a random balance that you owe, based off of running it through some model and then it spits out something. So that is a very, very key skill. I don't know about all the way to 2030 because this is such a moving target. No one has a crystal ball, of course. But that's something that I've seen at the end of last year and into this year. It should be said that, I'm not a proponent of just learning every tool there is, but learn the tools that are going to be working for you and be proficient at the tools if the job requires it. However, that is not necessarily a key component of the value edge. Yes, I think that's just like the baseline expectation that if you're a designer that you might need to even know. I even know researchers that are like using Claude Code and Figma to create their portfolios now. Researchers who have several years ago did not even want to sniff and do anything related to design, and they're like, I'm just going to keep my PDF deck and my whatever and my deck, and that's what it is. Other people are moving ahead because again, it's the barrier. You're lowering the barrier to entry to create these types of things. So but AI governance is a big skill. The other one that I've seen is I'm seeing, when you say UX, I also want to touch upon how I think what's happening in the field of UX and why the number of jobs with the label UX has gone down a lot. Now, that does not mean that the skill of UX is not needed anymore. What that means is basically when markets shift and new skills come in, unfortunately, of course, UX design research can be the first to be cut. But I view UX as like almost like a capability and a skill that can be absorbed and used across a lot of different work. On Friday, I'll have a list. There'll be a slide of about 25 to 30 different titles that I've seen UX live, like the work. It's like 60%, even up to 80% the same. But if you kind of broaden your view of like what skills would UX people need, sometimes you have to creep into a little bit of product management. Sometimes you got to creep into a little bit of business strategy. Sometimes if you want to go in the more technical architect route, because you really love working in the design and in vibe coding and vibe designing, you might have to understand a little bit about technical architecture. So it all varies. These all things could be, if I just tell you these are all the skills, then you can of course figure out what's going to be the right area for you. But I did want to touch upon that because I saw UX professionals, but I want to also provide a broader context of what I think is happening in UX as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll just kind of tack on here. This might, I think, is emphasized quite a lot on the internet, but I don't think it has like filtered in to how people are actually kind of applying and their portfolios. I think that, given that the tools available to us, designers that don't actually ship anything will be significantly less, and so like your competition of people that actually ship will just go higher. So for example, if you show like static screenshots on your portfolio, is that better than another designer that can show something interactive, something that the recruiter can play with, the hiring manager can play with, or an actual product that they've actually built that works, is functional? So I think the sort of that, I don't know, that sense of just like, okay, it's in Figma, not good enough, right? I need to make this real, it's relatively cheap to sort of, get it online and upload it. You don't need like servers and all that stuff. You can host it on the actual platform itself, whatever it is. I think there's just going to be influx of that. And even though people are emphasizing it today, we don't really know what the result of like, let's just say 100,000 designers like shipping stuff. How does that change the industry in terms of applications and what people look for? Because, right, like that's naturally going to evolve as the industry goes.
Yeah, I agree, because I think in the same way that researchers were creating portfolios that they never would before, designers should be shipping stuff that they never maybe were before too. What will happen, I don't know, but I think it's also a good opportunity for you. Basically, can ship whatever you want to show this whatever story that you want in the lane and position yourself however you want. So it's almost like I look at it as an opportunity to be like, hey, if you want to go into the e-commerce industry and do the X, Y, and Z, well, you can do a bunch of stuff. You don't have to redesign the Nike website anymore. You can actually just create whatever, you go through whatever problems and whatever lens that you have. You can show something. It even doesn't have to be an end-to-end, but it can be even if it's like a piece of, shipping a feature or an MVP of some small nugget that would be helpful for someone coming in to being like, oh, they understand this area. They really their kind of expertise lies within these domains. Okay, that makes sense. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Right. Okay. Shana says, sometimes I feel boxed in. My experience is mostly in e-commerce, which you just mentioned, but I feel like my skills are transferable to other industries within design. Is there any way we can combat that?
Yes, this happens a lot, because especially people that come in with some years of experience. It doesn't have to be a lot, but even if you have a couple of years of experience, I've come up with this concept of basically bridge skills. So the bridge skills and you have to basically understand, but in order to understand this, you have to understand what were all the issues, like exactly, e-commerce is also very, very large. I need to even niching down, understanding what part of e-commerce were you in? Was it B2B? Was it B2C? I don't know. Understanding that in depth, understanding the problems that you solved, what types of metrics were you impacting, what other types of outcomes were you impacting, and then you can now understand the places that you want to go, and you have to understand it almost in the same way. Now, you haven't done the work yet, but you could also get familiar in understanding what are the problems, what are those things that are needed in the industry, what do they look for, what do they what do they value, and then you can have a bridge. I'll give an example of some people things that I've done versus others. Is most of my experience is basically in financial markets, fintech, banking. However, I was able to basically land a contracting role in healthcare, and the bridge that connected them was nothing about, it wasn't about dollars and cents or anything like that. It was about hypersensitive, data and regulated industries, and that was the bridge. that was a bridge between them. And so I brought that up, and to be like, okay, I understand the problems. That's the bridge issue that exists in both. So let me frame my positioning that way. And I was able to basically, for certain roles, when they notice that, and I have like a case study that talks about that, then yes, then they can be like, okay, I trust this person enough that they've dealt in this arena in claims workflows or whatever. So let's have an interview with this person. And so, and then eventually that turned into a role, some years ago. But that is how the best way to do it. And it's not easy. I will say right now is a time where everyone is looking at domain experience. They're looking for the easiest. When they see 500 carbon copy saying the same thing, what is the easiest filter for them to look through? And it usually starts with domain and the domain understanding in industry. Is it fair? Not entirely, but that's just kind of how it is right now, because I know, Chris, everyone knows that you put a designer in any given area, we can figure it out. Like, we're resilient people. Put us in any industry. It's frustrating because we understand that. We're like, doesn't matter. We can do all these things. But what happens when 500 people also say, I can do all these things? What is the filtering down criteria? And it's usually in domain and industry. When you don't have that, you need to create the second best thing, which is kind of the bridge skill.
I'm talking about industry. Dane asked, what do you think are the safest sectors to specialize in? Healthcare, GovTech, HR, accessibility, something else? Are there any things that kind of stood out from the people you worked with, or the research that you've recently done?
Yeah, this is a good question. Of course, I will have a slide on this, and which will basically have a quadrant of all the different types of places. And what it is basically, it's how AI mature a company is one part of the quadrant, and then how mandated is their AI budget. And so in these ones you're talking about is, health tech, financial markets, gov tech. Accessibility is slightly different, but we can talk a little bit about that. Those 508 compliance in the government, but like accessibility, of course. And there's for example, I think in April there's some like WCAG 2.2 law or something coming in, at least in the US, and I think it might even be in Europe and other places. It's even more strict in terms of adhering to these types of standards. So yes, it'd be very important to know and have the quadrant. What you're showing right here, the health tech, gov tech, those areas, is basically low AI maturity spaces, but high but mandated budgets when it comes to basically like risk or other things. And so those are safer bets. But again, if you have no experience in those, then you have to build that experience, because those are safer bets. You have to be extraordinarily positioned exactly to what they want. You can't come from like, going just like me trying to get a job at Spotify. I'll never get a job there ever. Like, no matter how hard I tried, if I knew this, if I knew all the VPs, I might get an interview, but they might be like, no, sorry. So same way, someone from Spotify, even coming into working in a healthcare claims, app, very, very difficult. So it's like, you have to be very well positioned in the area. And I'll talk about those quadrants, more on Friday.
Sure. Okay, well, let's switch gears to, we were talking about sort of experienced folks and kind of like moving around or looking at different industries. But how about someone that who's just graduated, landing and starting in a UX position with nothing but a portfolio? And this gentleman is being declined for entry-level graduate positions while he surpasses the requirements. So basically overqualified for an entry level, but still not really having any luck with just a portfolio.
Yeah, this is unfortunately, in the last couple of years, the number of entry level and junior level roles have also just precipitously dropped. And that's partly due to, I hate to say it's partly due to AI, but it's like at least the perception of, AI taking some of these, collapsing some of the execution types of roles where people would come in and do a lot of this, typical kind of wireframe, mock-up, learn, get feedback from seniors, be on a team. That world is unfortunately kind of going away. So you basically have, in your scenario, I will come back to this. You still, even at someone who is a graduate, early career, junior, you still need to find a value wedge. And so currently I'm working with someone, same thing. She had basically, she came from a boot camp. She had 2 years, but it was no paid experience. It was just like, I worked at a friend's startup. I'd volunteered over here. What do I do, Rajeev? I don't know where to go. And I was like, we need to find your value wedge. And so let's go through all the work that you potentially done. Let's figure out what is growing in the market, and let's double down in that area and start showing that, hey, your first featured case study and your second featured case study should be in that arena. Now, by doing that, and that might take a lot of work because you have to figure out what that is. You have to also kind of assemble and architect your portfolio and your story in a way that is going to make the most sense. She ended up doing, I'll just give you an example. Though she's in the Bay Area, the legal tech industry is growing a lot because of they're lagging slightly with the super AI forward companies, but they're implementing a lot of AI features, and she happened to be working on one or two of those projects. So I was like, this is a perfect opportunity. Let's position you that way. And I was like, but when you do that, you can't be going for those big, massive Fang companies. So I was like, they're not going to hire you. You basically have two options. You can go the startup route, small, medium-sized business, and it might require you to do some potential freelance. It could be paid or it could do volunteer until someone trusts you enough that you can actually do a paid job in their niche and in their domain. Unfortunately, that's the reality. And the only other route that if you wanted to do it is joining some, what I call like apprenticeship, if it's a larger company, like an apprenticeship or a rotational program or internship to hire. But again, even when they do these, you have to show that you've done like similar work. You can't just be like, I've done work, I haven't done nothing, and let me just apply away and I'm getting no results. Like, you have to really figure this value wedge piece out. And it's a great exercise because it'll not only equip you for getting a role now, but what this is going to happen perpetually in the future. Like, markets are going to go up and down, left and right. You have to understand where and move with the markets and understand what's going to actually get you a role now and get you positioning such that you're confident in what you do. And then when you start building up that experience, getting that first small paid freelance contract, then you can maybe work at a startup, then you can work at, somewhere else. But that's what it is right now. In the past, people were doing that, just not to this extent. But the good news is, like we were talking about before, is the whole AI, you have all these AI tools at your disposal. You can, in one weekend, you can create a project and show that you have an understanding of a certain area, and you have, so it just understanding, just avoiding some of the pitfalls and just kind of honing in and focusing on where your value is going to be needed the most. So even for people who are junior and entry level, this is my recommendation to them, and I work with them as well.
Yeah, and it sounds like for this question, someone pivoting to UX design with no experience, that's also the kind of the same advice. Like, figure out what that experience before you had, and then actually go get that experience. And again, like, try to wedge yourself into somewhere so you can build that up, right? You can't. It's very hard in this market with zero experience and all the competition to just get hired out the gate. Is that correct?
Those don't exist. And just applying away and getting frustrated by it and being like, well, it's not happening, I don't know what to do. We got to be small. We got to take a little bit of step further and, kind of think beyond that. I'm here to obviously guide and help you to think along that path. But it'll work with you in the future. Like, even for this one right here, having no experience, there's someone who I'm working with right now, experience was like in medical publishing. And she's like, what do I do? I wrote a lot, I helped in a lot of journals. Should I get into, but she got basically into like UX writing, content design, and accessibility because she did some accessibility stuff. So she did a boot camp, had one small project, but she did one locally in her area. And then she realized, okay, I need to. So now we're basically content design, accessibility. That's her expertise with websites. And now she has a portfolio, but again, came from a different industry with several years of experience, but still positioned as not maybe an expert, a senior level person, but you don't want to be put in as an entry level. Number one, doesn't exist. But number two, you feel like it's an ego hit, but like you have to, but you can be put as in like, a mid-level, respectable, trustworthy person, all about positioning and the value edge. I cannot overstate that enough.
Yeah, sure. This is a slightly different one. Someone, Andreas, I think from Sweden, is actually transitioning out of UX and product into visual web design. Are you familiar with those sectors? And if yes, is your strategy applicable to those sectors too?
So yes, I am familiar with that. I would, and I've worked with people who moved away, as well as sometimes I wouldn't say this is totally moving away. I would say this is an adjacent move. You still have to please keep your UX thinking cap on. Even if you go to web design, you're going to need it. It's the same. Although I know it's not like, working on software products and services, it might just be, web design, but you still have to apply the same thinking. So like, design is design, but from a positioning standpoint, you would have to basically apply the same things that I'm talking about now too. And you'd have to basically say, I'm a website designer through and through. And a lot of times that could be with, you have to look at companies that have the bleeding need for some sort of design change. It could be a massive website migration for a long, they're changing their CMS. And so you need to find out, what those pain points would be. It could be digital and marketing agencies who basically work on a lot of, you might have to upskill slightly potentially in marketing areas to understand, SEO and how AI plays into it. Again, it all depends. Even within web design, there's a lot of different slices of where you could go, but you have to apply it in the same form or fashion. And so even the majority of the people that I work with are in UX design, research, and some product management. I'm starting to see this year, there's people last year and this year, there's people like, I want to move away, or like, I want to go from research to product management, or like, I want to get out of this field completely and be an executive assistant at a nonprofit, which I give that example because that actually happened. So, but we applied the same principle. So it really doesn't matter. This positioning can apply anywhere to anyone. But at first I want to start with the field that we all love and near and dear to our heart the most. And so that's why I try to help, anyone kind of in the design, research and product space.
Yeah. And like, visual design and web design is actually, to use your words, Rajeev, a growing market, right? Like,
Yeah.
I see a lot of demand, and some like boutique agencies are really, really killing it, especially online. That's all I see actually. And like the hiring managers in design, or designers that hire other folks, kind of are similar in lots of ways in their process. And so there is a tremendous overlap in our field in general. I mean, I can't speak for like interior designers, or folks that are like architects,
Architectural, yeah, exactly,
right?
yeah.
But I think visual design, web design, is fairly similar. And and there's just a natural overlap. Okay, this is an interesting question that came in. How to protect your case study from being stolen, like stolen ideas from hiring managers. Is that something you've seen happen?
I've never seen that happen. Oh, well, let me try and think. Protect your case study from being stolen ideas from hiring managers. I wouldn't even know how you would. Maybe you I think that's like just kind of serendipitous that you maybe just came across that and found that. I've never seen that. The truth is, there really is no way to stop it because anyone can view your profile now, unless you can password protect it and do all those other types of things. That's the only way that I can think of. The opposite happened to me is that I was sent a cease and desist like about 4 years ago from the healthcare company that I did the project in, because I had one screen that basically had one line in a screenshot that had something. I got an email from the lawyers and they're like, I was like, what is this cease and desist from? It was a Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is a big healthcare company. And that was like the parent company. I was like, what is this? I ended up just taking it off, of course, but I was just like, I'm not about to fight this. It's fine. I was like, maybe my mistake, but I haven't seen, the cease and desist. That's crazy. The cease and desist. I mean, and it happened 3 years after I actually finished and left and moved on. So like someone was going around finding stuff. But it just reminded me of that because maybe people are going around and finding different work from different case studies, doing searches and trying to find ideas. The only way that I can think you can protect it is basically password protect, but I've not heard, the opposite has happened, but I've not heard of this.
Apparently this happened to her 3 times, which is unbelievable. I mean, I guess at this point, it would just be a huge compliment. It depends, like,
Yeah, depending. Maybe you need to take
yeah,
action, at some point, bro. Or if you know the person, or like potentially call them out, put some, I'm not sure what country you live in, but like how the, what, where you are, that might depend on what your legal routes are.
yeah. I would almost like make I would also make a case study of the person stealing your case study. Like,
Yeah, that would
here's
move.
my
That probably go
original case
viral.
study. Yeah, and then it's
Yeah.
like, here's this company that literally cost, like, clearly I'm doing something good, right? Like, maybe you can kind of reposition yourself there. That's interesting. Okay, well, we're at time, but we have a ton more questions. And I know, Rajiv, you have, dedicated time on Friday to just like dive into all of this stuff. So if you haven't got your questions answered, but you really want to ask Rajiv, join his webinar on Friday, and he will do a deep dive with you guys. Anything else we need to touch on before I let you go? Because I know we're kind of out of time.
I don't think so. I think I talked about everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, we talked about. Yep, I think that's it. Just a more of just a reminder, that I'll be going
absolutely.
into a lot more detail. It's 2 hours, but in honesty, sometimes it goes even more than that. Just I was telling Chris before we started, I was like, in the past, it's gone like 3 hours, 3+ hours, because people have so many questions. As you can imagine, when I start stating these things, people are like, wait, what about me? What about that? What about this? And that's all that happens. And so, yep.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to flash this on screen again, so you can remind the folks. Gonna just step back a bit. Please tell us again what's going on, and I will hide for a second, and I'll join you once you're done. Take as much time as you need, please.
Sure. And so hopefully I was able to answer some questions. When I came up with this, title, Talented, Experienced, and Ignored, it's not necessarily just for people with so many years of experience. You're all talented, whether you're just starting out, whether you have several years experience, or you're manager or director level. But the commonality is that talented, you're experienced, and you're being ignored in the market. And I'm trying to explain to everyone why you're being ignored in the market, what you can do about it. And a lot of the topics that we talked about today, your value wedge, positioning, what to do and actually reflect these back into your assets, into your portfolio, in your resume, in your LinkedIn. How do you do that? How do you action that based upon your value wedge? And then, of course, job searching, how it works, how you get chosen, how to maximize your chances of being seen in the right, what I call, when you build your bubble in the right areas, so that you're doing less I need to hunt and more I'm going to be found. And yes, you might need to do a little bit of hunting and cold applying, but let's make sure that it's actually a precision type of application and not just blindly applying. This is begging a lot. Me presenting this obviously begs a lot of questions, so I'm going to answer all those. But join is completely free. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. So if you can join me at Friday at 2 p.m., I'm looking forward to talking through you in a lot more detail, with slides, as well as a QA at the end.
Amazing. Well, Rajiv, thank you for coming on and sharing and trying to answer all these questions. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of new concepts that I haven't thought about, that you shared. So it'll be interesting to like see some of those frameworks like visually and actually going through the exercise. I think that's really helpful, especially with the sort of that 3 Venn diagram that you were speaking about, like growing market and skills that are lacking in that market. So it's like super clear how you can actually stand out. And that the concept of like, you want to be a specialist uh, at the beginning, and then be more of a generalist as soon as you kind of get into that company. That makes a ton of sense. But thank you so much for joining today, dude. And I'll let you go, and I just need to wrap up. But thanks again, man. It's been awesome.
My pleasure. Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
And one other thing I want to flash on screen is we had some appreciation from the audience. So always a nice thing to see. So okay, cool. All right, great. Thanks, man. See ya.
Take care. Bye.
All right, guys. Again, I want to help Rajiv remind you that Friday the 13th, scan the QR codes wherever. He's hosting this free live masterclass And if you like the conversation today, he'll again go much deeper into how to get traction in the job market this year. And I think this masterclass is well worth your time. Clearly, Rajeev is one of the sharpest career strategists I know, and he's bringing out these frameworks. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't even thought about that. So that was kind of cool. Yeah, again, scan that QR code and join him on Friday as well. And I believe one thing that Rajeev didn't say is that you'll actually get the first chapter of his book that he's working on called Repositioned. So, that's a cool little bonus. If you can't make it, but you want the free book too, that's kind of nice. And I want to tell you about the next live that's coming up. Dun, 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 dun. The next live is with Ryan Rumsey. He is the founder of the CDO School, the Chief Design Officer School, and the author of Business Thinking for Designers. I don't know if you guys remember when InVision was around, but he worked with InVision to release this book, Business Thinking for Designers. And I and him are going to talk next week on March the 13th about how to build a personal OS with AI. We've been speaking about AI so much, but like, how can you actually use it in a more effective way? I think that's kind of the question. Especially like, we've written a lot of things. We have, our Notion or whatever it is that has just a ton of information about us. Our computer full of our files. How do we actually use, AI in a way that could be our personal operating system? So we're going to be speaking about three things: the context layer, how to build that, then how to actually codify your expertise, right? Or the way you think. And then how to build AI agents with your judgment, meaning how do you build, little tiny robots that work for you, and you don't have to be like, oh, that's, I don't want that person to do that. You actually trust this agent. So that'll be really, really fun. Can you share the link here, please? Yes, I will share the link again for Rajiv's Friday the 13th. After this, give me a sec because, but it'll be on the actual event on LinkedIn. So you guys can go ahead and click that. If you're on your phone, I might be able to flash this again. And basically all you need to do is screenshot it. And then you can actually scan that QR code by pressing on the screenshot. I don't know if you guys knew that, but that's it there. Anyway, yeah, so I'll be taking a lot of notes about especially next week, because I'm always thinking about like, how can I actually be more efficient and work better, and especially leverage AI from a designer's perspective, because I think it's easy with like developers and engineers, but for a designer it can be quite confusing. So and Ryan would actually be showing us how to build his, like how he built his personal operating system. So to listen to that and more conversation like this, you can again scan that QR code and just get reminded. I'm going to send out everything that we discussed today on Friday as well, the conversation I had with Rajeev. So hopefully you can take some notes, and again, you'll get the email if you're on the list. But I think that's everything from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I saw a lot of folks say thank you. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. And any guy for remote job, as I just joined. Okay. Someone just asked any guy for remote jobs. Okay. I'm sure Rajeev has a whole section on like picking jobs that kind of fit your criteria. So I'm sure there's that there too in his session. But anyway, that's enough from me. Until next time, I always mess this bit up, but bye. I didn't press it. God damn it. Bye. This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.
This is the design of everyday people.